Redditor Sterling Pound put up the screenshot of a translated article about Bridgerton Season 4A on the Bridgerton Netflix subreddit, and shout out to them as they also shared the link to the article, which is in French, but I will leave said link in the description bar for those who want to check it out. But there was something in the article that I found very interesting. The writer had inferred that the new season so far is a bit more romantic than spicy. Matter of fact, they state the creators cheerfully dangle upcoming sex scenes like a tingling carrot in front of us. Just when things threaten to get spicy, Netflix cuts the season in half, forcing us to wait another month for satisfaction. Thus, matriarch Violet finds love, or rather lust, with the luscious Lord Anderson. And something about their line and their take of this season being not as spicy as the others had me thinking about that actually, about sex and how this season, Bridgerton actually has it in its many iterations be a central part of different couples' stories and uses it as a vehicle to address different plot points and give a more in depth understanding of the characters in a way that I particularly enjoy. Are there not as many shots of boobs and ass like we've gotten in other seasons? Yes. Do I find how Bridgerton is using sex, however, to convey so much of its characters this season, especially as it pertains to Will and Alice Mondrich, Pauline, Francesca and John, Violet and Marcus, and of course Benefy? Oh, hell yeah. Of course, before I get started on the rest of the video, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lena, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. I don't think anyone that watches Bridgerton is averse to the fact that the show does feature quite a number of raunchy sex scenes. It is, after all, an adaptation of a series of books that fit into the historical erotica subgenre. And from the very first season, when we are treated to the delectable ass of the Duke of Hastings railing his new bride all over their honeymoon estate, we were made very aware that sex is something that Bridgerton is never going to shy away from. And so, I think with that comes the expectation that that would feature heavily in each season moving forward. And while some people might disagree, I think if we all really consider things, I would say that Saphne was given way more sex scenes than any of the other Bridgerton couples that came after them. Which, when you think about it, makes more sense because of all the stories that we got. Saphne was the one that spent about half their season time married. So, of course, we got to witness all the honeymoon fucking because their conflicts didn't come to play until after said honeymoon. The same can't be said for Canthony, who didn't get together until the end of their season, which is why we didn't get to have more sex scenes, which hurts because their chemistry was fire. Of course, I'm also pissed because Book Canthony got married in the middle of their story, and so in the books, we had more sexy times with them as well, but I am sorry, I digress. Pauline, we also know, did get together before the end of the story, but they didn't really get to enjoy a honeymoon period because their conflict popped up even before they got married. I'm stating all of this clearly to point out how narratively it made sense that we got a lot more of Saphne's union than we did of the others. However, that isn't the focus of today's video. No, instead, I want to talk about how Bridgerton uses sex slash desire in order to explore the stories of five different couples that we got in season 4A. Because they do hit the nail on the head about how one's sex life does say a lot about the type of person we are and what journey we are currently on. For example, the Mondriches. The brief glimpse we do get into their bedroom shows that they do regard each other as equals, that they are playful and fun, and this, therefore, is reflected in their sex life as well. That their desire for each other, even though they've been married for all these years with three kids that are growing very quickly, and yet They still don't take themselves too seriously and are very at ease with each other. And this, we can all agree, is something that we see reflected about Will and Alice's interactions with each other outside their bedroom as well. With them, we also get to see the newly elevated members of the ton who don't necessarily take themselves too seriously. And I don't know about you, but I do find that an absolute delight. And it also speaks to the contrast between how the elite nobility are made to think about sex, particularly the women in those classes, and how those on the lower rung of society do. This is not just about Bridgerton, this cuts across the time period. And then there's Pauline. And while some people might complain about how their carriage ride was disrupted just before Penelope could reach her pinnacle, I do find it very interesting and fitting with their part of the story, because the glimpse of their sex life that we got to see in the moment shows them as the newlyweds who can't keep their hands off of each other and are always down to fuck the moment they have a smidgen of privacy or some time alone. And I find that incredibly fitting for them. Plus, it's a nice nod, a great circle back moment, because we are reminded of how they got together, their first sexual experience with each other, with Colin's fingers deep inside Penelope, which was then followed by his proposal to her to make an honest woman out of her. That we have now come full circle to them once again recreated the magic of carriage sex with all its uncomfortableness and the bumps of trying to get it on whilst being driven on uneven cobblestones, now that they are married and can do that as often as they want within the privacy that they can find. It's very delightful to me. Especially because highlighting Pauline's very active sex life is a great contrast to John and Francesca's own, because they both represent two parts of the married life experience, especially as it pertains to couples where one of them is inexperienced. On one hand, we have Colin and Pen having a swell time with Penelope hitting her pinnacle multiple times because there's the great sexual compatibility and everything just clicks for them. And then on the other hand, we have John and Francesca, who to me represent the couples that don't immediately click sexually. If you're someone who does come from a country or culture where arranged marriages are a thing, you would understand what I'm talking about. Not every married couple gets it right immediately or the first couple of times. Some of them do tend to take a while to get to that point because you're basically strangers and you're trying to discover and learn your partner's body, the way in which to bring them pleasure. For some, it is instinctive, for some, it is immediate, and for others, it takes a while. That is what I see with regards John and Francesca. It's taking them a while to get there, and it's a very realistic portrayal for some newlyweds as well. Now, I know some people might be about to point at their knee jerk belief that this is happening because the story has been changed to make Fran only be sexually attracted to women. And maybe that is the case. I would wait until we get to the rest of season 4B and we get Francella's own season before I come to that conclusion. Because for me, I do kind of want to still believe in her love for John as well from the books. Maybe this would be a way for the show to highlight that romantic love can still exist without sexual desire, which might be what Fran is experiencing with John. And when certain events happen from the books, not going to say what it is exactly for spoilers, then maybe we'll get to see yet another aspect of Fran's love that is filled with both romantic and sexual desire. Maybe this is just wishful thinking on my part, but I am still a big proponent of the fact that Francesca Bridgerton did have two great loves in her life, and I hope that the show is able to convey that properly. Then there's Violet and Marcus, which I cheered for when we got it. Now, I know a lot of people complain about Bridgerton having way too many subplots, but as I've always said on my channel, I do believe that if you have an ensemble cast, the way Bridgerton does, it behoves you to make good use of them all, especially in a way that reads as a logical progression or that ties into the main story being told. And since sex and desire is a fundamental part of Bridgerton's romances, having Violet Bridgerton navigate getting back into the saddle because of her attraction to Marcus Anderson makes complete sense to me. Now, maybe it's because I'm biased. I've always been drawn to stories that feature older couples because I do think society as we know it is pretty ageist, and no one ever really wants to consider or think about the fact that older people also enjoy sex and do have those desires that they should explore. And so We getting that representation with Violet makes me extremely happy because it's very much deserved. For a woman like Violet Bridgerton, who we know must have had a very, very healthy sex life. I mean, she had 8 kids, 8 all as children. You can tell that Edmund Bridgerton definitely enjoyed the company of his wife and vice versa. For her to have had such a sexually gratifying marriage and then lose her husband when they were both fairly young, to give context, Edmund died at 38. Part of Anthony's fears was that he would never reach that age because he had convinced himself that 37 was the oldest he was ever going to get. It shows that they, and by they, I mean Edmund and Violet, were pretty young when Edmund passed. Between the grief, the depression, and her fight to re enter the lives of her children, Violet has put so much of her own desires on hold that seeing her really focus on her garden blossoming was a delight to witness. In her interactions with Marcus, we see a focus on what it means to slowly rediscover your body and find your way back to your own desire after you thought you'd left it all behind. Like Miss Wilson tells Violet, life is for living, and part of living is fucking. And just the moment where Violet gets to shed her clothes, to look at herself, to battle with what it means to still catch the eye of an attractive man after having birthed and raised 8 kids, it's a beautiful story in itself. Contrary to what that article wrote, I am perfectly fine with it not being as raunchy as the others because Marcus and Violet's sex life for me has always been about her comfort, what she gets to show as she slowly opens herself up to the man she's attracted to. And I think that was captured very well. And then there's everything with Benedict and Sophie. And whilst I do think that this was implied, I am surprised that it seems to have skipped some fans' heads, especially with the article, because there's a clear reason why Sophie and Benedict's first time would take a while, as it does in the book as well. It's not just dangling things for tantalizing sake. Sophie Bake is the daughter of a maid turned mistress. To her, sex is something that bound her mother to a life of what the rest of their society would call dishonorable. The reason why she couldn't call her father a father was because of her illegitimacy. So, is it that much of a stretch to consider that Sophie isn't in a rush to repeat her mother's mistake? Like, that is pretty clear with her characterization. As much as she desires Benedict, she's also aware of what the lasting effect of following through on said desires with a man who, just like her father did with her mother, is offering her a life as his mistress due to the fact that their society as is would not accept him being with a maid. And before anybody drops a comment about, well, technically, Sophie isn't just a maid, she's the ward of an earl, his illegitimate daughter, actually, please consider that Benedict doesn't know this. Also consider as well that Sophie is not aware of how this knowledge would be able to get her the happy ending that she deserves, as it needs a bit more planning and plotting to make it so. I am not going to go into details about how that is done and who is responsible for the sake of those who haven't read the books and want to be surprised about how everything is resolved at the end. But Benedict is not aware, and Sophie does not know how things would be managed. And so, therefore, what she has to deal with is Benedict with his offer for her to be his mistress, and Sophie, for whom desire came with shame and ostracization in her mother's case. Once again, mistresses are secrets to be kept, which isolates them quite well, especially when they aren't from working backgrounds like Sienna, where they have an actual job outside of their patrons and lovers. So, of course, Sophie isn't as open to the thought of that as Benedict would expect, and thus we will have to deal with yet another prolonged moment before Benofi get to experience their first sexual encounter. But just like I stated at the start of the video, in their case, for their story, it works. But yeah, these are just my thoughts. As would I would as always love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched it and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming and ASMR channels if they sound like something you might potentially possibly be interested in. I have them both linked in the description. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.